Millionaire sees young missionary trapped in a cage while wasps attack. Comment, telling me what you thought of this story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10 and comment from which city you are watching me. I really want to know if you like my story and I want to get to know you better. So subscribe to my channel to support my work. I am counting on your help. The sun had not even risen when Michael heard the sound. It was not the wind. He knew well the cold draft that swept down from the mountain ridge every morning, carrying the scent of damp earth and dry leaves. It was something else, a deep, pulsating buzz coming from somewhere among the rocky outcrops ahead. Michael stopped. His feet, already calloused from walking that rugged trail so much, recognized the uneven terrain even before his eyes adjusted to the dim light. 3 months of solitary hikes had turned that ritual into his only reason to get out of bed. It was not exercise, it was an escape. He had arrived in that region claiming he was looking to invest in land. The truth was different. He was looking for a place where the silence did not hurt so much, where the absence of his youngest daughter did not echo in every empty room of the house that was once full of life. A year. It had been a year since her departure, and Michael, a wealthy man of the sort who hoards and isolates himself, had chosen to bury himself among stones so he would not have to spend this cursed anniversary alone. The buzzing grew louder. Michael moved forward slowly, dodging dry branches that lay scattered across the rocky ground like natural traps. That was when he saw it, between 2 blocks of dark stone, partially hidden by twigs and low shrubs. There was a metal cage, and inside it, motionless, a young woman. Around the structure, a swarm of wasps swirled in dense circles like a living storm that would not dissipate. Michael felt his heart race. He took 2 more steps. The young woman did not move. Her eyes, large, dark, exhausted, simply watched him. There was no screaming. There was no cry for help. Just a quiet suspicion, the kind of look Michael recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who has already tried asking for help and learned that it solves nothing. He took off his jacket, wrapped it around his right arm, and advanced toward the cage. The wasps reacted immediately. 2, 3, 5 stings burned against his skin before he managed to wave them off long enough to reach the latch. The metal was rusted, hard to move. Michael forced it with his fingers, then with the weight of his body. The latch gave way with a dry creak. The young woman stumbled out. Michael reached out his hand. She did not accept it. "Are you able to walk?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse from not speaking to anyone for days. She nodded but did not speak. Michael took a step back, pointing to the trail, saying, "Let us go. I live nearby. You need to get out of here." She looked at him one more time, not with gratitude, but with a cold analysis, as if measuring whether he was a lesser threat than what she had just left behind. Then she started walking. That was when the ground gave way. Michael did not see the loose rock. His left foot sank between 2 jagged stones, and the weight of his body did the rest. He fell to the side, striking his knee against the hard ground, feeling a sharp pain explode in his ankle. He let out a low curse, trying to stand, but his leg did not obey properly. The young woman stopped. She turned around. For a moment, Michael thought she would simply keep going alone, and he would not blame her for it. But she came back. Without saying a word, she tore the hem of her own skirt, already dirty and ripped in other places, and knelt beside him. With precise movements, she tied the fabric around his ankle, over his boot, creating a sort of makeshift brace. "That is going to hurt when you walk," she said. It was the first thing she spoke. Her voice was low, controlled. "But it will hold until we get there." Michael looked at her, surprised, and asked if she had experience with that. She did not answer. She just stood up and held out her hand. This time, she was the one offering help. Michael accepted. They descended the slippery trail together, every step a negotiation between his sprained ankle and Michael's bruised pride. He tried asking questions, what her name was, what had happened, who had put her there. The young woman answered in monosyllables, or simply did not answer at all. Michael learned during those 2 hours of agonizing dissent that forcing her to speak would be useless. But he learned the essentials. Her name was Chloe. She was 23 years old. She was a missionary. She had arrived in the mountains 2 weeks earlier to work with an isolated community up in the hills. And the man who had ordered her to be put in that cage was named Thomas. When they finally spotted Michael's property, a simple, spacious cabin surrounded by rocky terrain and a few scattered trees, the sun was already high. Sarah, the only housekeeper Michael kept at the house, rushed to the gate as soon as she saw them. She called out to Mr. Michael, running up to them with her eyes wide, asking what had happened and who the girl was. "I will explain later," Michael said, leaning on Chloe with more weight than he cared to admit, and told Sarah to prepare a room and bring water, lots of water. Sarah hesitated for only a second before obeying. Chloe walked into the house without looking back. No thanks, no explanations, as if being there was just another temporary stop on a journey that had not yet ended. Michael sat on the porch, his ankle throbbing, the wasp stings burning beneath his skin. He looked at the mountains in the distance, at the dark rocks that marked the beginning of the trail. He did not know it yet, but he had just made the first mistake in a sequence that would change everything. 2 of his hired hands, Ryan and Kyle, local men who took care of the property's maintenance, had shadowed Michael's every step through the mountains that morning, hidden among the rocks, watching, and everything he had seen and done was no longer a secret. Chloe spent the first 3 days like a ghost. She ate little, just enough so Sarah would not insist. She spoke even less. She vanished into the corners of the house, occupying the back bedroom as if trying to become invisible, as if the simple act of existing in someone else's space was an intrusion that needed to be minimized. Michael watched her from afar, clumsy in his own attempt to give her space. He did not know how to handle heavy silences, not since his daughter had passed away, taking with her the house's entire capacity to fill the voids. Now there was another silence, different, denser, and Michael stumbled over it, just as he stumbled over everything else. On the second day, he knocked over a stack of documents he was organizing on the living room table, papers scattered across the hardwood floor, some sliding under the couch. Michael swore softly, bent down with difficulty because his ankle still hurt, and started picking them up. Chloe appeared in the doorway. She said nothing. She just knelt down and started gathering the papers with him, organizing them in order without him having to ask. "Thank you," Michael muttered. She did not answer. She handed him the reorganized stack and left. On the 3rd day, Michael miscalculated how many bags of feed he needed for the month and ended up asking for help out loud, more to himself than to anyone else. Chloe emerged from somewhere in the house. He did not even know she was nearby, and corrected the numbers in silence, pointing out the mistake on the makeshift spreadsheet he kept. It was Sarah who noticed before Michael did. Chloe was, little by little, becoming indispensable. Not because she needed to be, but because of his inability not to need someone. Sarah spoke to Mr. Michael on the morning of the 4th day, while brewing coffee in the kitchen. She spoke quietly but firmly, telling him that the young lady was not going to stay forever, and asking if he knew that. Michael looked at her, confused, saying he did not ask her to stay, she was the one who did. "That is not it," Sarah interrupted, "a rare occurrence," explaining that Chloe was there because she had nowhere else to go yet, but when she did, she would leave, and Michael was going to miss someone he barely knew. Michael did not reply, but the words lingered. It was on the 5th day that everything began to take shape. Chloe came down for breakfast, another rarity, as she usually ate alone in her room, and sat at the table with Michael and Sarah. She sat in silence for a while, distractedly picking at the bread on her plate. Then she spoke. She said she did not come to the mountains by chance. Michael looked up. Sarah stopped pouring the coffee. Chloe continued, her voice still low, but steadier than in the previous days, explaining she received a calling from a woman named Eleanor. She said Eleanor was a sort of guardian of the community's memory up there in the hills, who recorded the customs, the stories, and the names of the old families. Eleanor had asked for her help to document everything before it was lost. Michael asked why her. Because I'm not from around here, Chloe replied, adding that she had no ties to anyone in the region. She hesitated before adding that Eleanor knew someone was trying to erase those stories, and she needed an outsider to protect what was left. Sarah sat down slowly, asking if Eleanor was that older lady who lived near the old church. Chloe nodded, saying Eleanor welcomed her on her first day and showed her the notebooks, dozens of them, containing stories spanning decades, old conflicts, resolutions, and agreements between families. She paused, taking a deep breath, and said Eleanor had told her about Thomas. The name dropped onto the table like a stone. Michael chose his words carefully, saying Thomas was respected around there, or at least that was what people said. Thomas is feared, Chloe corrected, stating that Eleanor was the only person he genuinely feared in return because she knew everything and had it all written down. Chloe looked directly at Michael and revealed that the day she was put in that cage, Eleanor disappeared. The silence that settled in was unlike any of the others. Michael felt his stomach churn, asking if she thought he had done something. I do not think anything, Chloe interrupted, but pointed out that she vanished on the exact same day and no one talks about it. Sarah crossed her arms, her face tense, warning Mr. Michael that he could not get involved in this because Thomas was not a man for open brawls. But what? Michael stood up, ignoring the pain in his ankle, demanding to know if he was supposed to pretend he did not see anything when Thomas locks a girl in a cage full of wasps and makes an old woman disappear. You were supposed to think, Sarah told him, her voice harsh now, reminding him that Ryan and Kyle worked there. They were Thomas's trusted men, and everything Michael did or said, they knew and heard. Michael felt his blood run cold, asking if she was sure. Sarah did not need to answer. Her expression said it all. Chloe remained silent, but her eyes tracked Michael with a newfound intensity, as if measuring what he would do next. Michael made the decision in that very moment. It was his first major conscious decision since his daughter's passing, and also his first major error in judgment. I am going to talk to him, Michael declared, stating he was going up there to sort it out. Sarah tried to stop him, but he was already walking out. On the seventh day, Michael went personally to the heart of the community. He believed his money, his position as an outside landowner, could open doors. He believed men like Thomas respected economic power. He was wrong. Thomas received him with cold courtesy. The house where he saw visitors was simple, clean, with white plaster walls and sparse furniture. There was a cross on the wall, a wooden table, and 2 chairs. Thomas welcomed him, smiling without any warmth, saying what an honor it was to host the new landowner and asking him to take a seat. Michael sat. Thomas poured tea into 2 clay mugs, saying he imagined Michael had come to talk about the young lady. Michael confirmed, holding the mug, but not drinking, and demanded to know why she was in that cage and where Eleanor was. Thomas tilted his head as if pondering, and explained the young lady was being corrected because she trespassed on territory that did not belong to her, without permission and without respect for local customs, which demanded a response. A response. Michael felt his anger rising, asking if he called that a response. I call it a necessity, Thomas replied, his voice still calm. And as for Eleanor, he claimed she was fine, just resting, because age takes its toll. Michael stood up, demanding to see her. Thomas said that would not be possible right now. When Michael asked why, Thomas did not answer right away, just looking at him with expressionless eyes, as if calculating something, before making a subtle gesture with his hand. That was when Michael noticed two men he had only seen in passing, Matthew and Luke, blocking the door. Thomas told Mr. Michael he was going to stay there for a bit, just until nightfall. Nothing major, just to ensure certain things were taken care of before they came to a better understanding. Michael felt his heart race, telling him he could not do that, but Thomas smiled and said he could and would, but without violence or threats, just time. It was 6 hours. 6 hours sitting in that room, guarded, not knowing what was happening outside. When they finally let him go, as night fell, Michael rushed back to his property with his ankle protesting every step. The house was empty. Sarah was sitting on the porch, her left arm bandaged, her face pale. "They took her," Sarah said, her voice trembling, explaining that Ryan and Kyle took her. She tried to stop them and fell, but could not. Michael slumped to the floor beside her, his legs giving out. Chloe was gone. And this time, it was entirely his fault. The 8th day was the longest of Michael's life. He woke up on the porch floor, where he had spent the entire night sitting, unable to bring himself to go into the empty house. His ankle throbbed. His right shoulder was stiff from being in the same position for so long, but none of that mattered. The physical pain was irrelevant next to the weight he felt in his chest. Sarah came out with 2 mugs of coffee. She sat next to him without saying a word. They stayed there, watching the sun rise over the mountains, the silence between them heavy with unspoken things. It was Michael who broke the silence first, his voice coming out hoarse and broken, saying he ruined everything. He admitted he thought he could fix it, thought it was enough to just go up there and throw his money or position around to do something, letting out a humorless laugh and call it. "You were," Sarah agreed mercilessly. But then her voice softened as she added that it was not too late. Michael looked at her, asking how it was not too late, since they took her and Thomas locked him in there just to buy time, knowing exactly what he was doing. Sarah took a sip of her coffee and noted that Eleanor did not just wander off. Michael frowned, asking what she meant. "She was hidden," Sarah explained, "by someone who is still on the inside." Sarah looked at him with that steadfastness he had learned to respect, stating that if someone hid Eleanor, it was because there were still people who did not agree with Thomas, people who could help. Michael felt something stir inside him. It was not hope, it was too small to be called that, but it was something. He asked how they could find these people. Sarah gave a half smile, saying Eleanor left a trail. She was no fool, and if she knew Thomas was trying to wipe out the history, she scattered copies, hid information, and left things with people she trusted. When Michael asked if she knew these people, Sarah said she knew a few, finishing her coffee and telling him he was going to have to trust her and do what she said, not what he thought he should do. Michael nodded. For the first time in a week, he did not have enough pride left to argue. They spent the next 2 days investigating. Sarah knew the area better than Michael realized. She had grown up there before moving away to work in bigger houses in the towns, and she knew who talked to whom, who kept secrets, who feared Thomas, and who only pretended to. On the 10th day, they found Susan. She was a midwife, living in a secluded cabin away from the main hub of the community, up on a rocky rise that was tough to get to. Sarah had known her since childhood. Susan was the type who listened more than she spoke, and because of that, she knew everything. When Michael and Sarah arrived, it was already getting dark. Susan met them at the door with suspicion, but let them in. Sarah cut to the chase, saying she came about Eleanor. Susan looked at Michael, sizing him up, and stated he was the man who pulled the girl out of the cage. It was not a question. "I am," Michael confirmed. Susan stayed silent for a long moment. Then she walked over to an old cabinet, opened a hidden drawer in the back, and pulled out a hardcover notebook, weathered by time. She placed it on the table, saying Eleanor gave it to her 3 weeks ago, asking her to keep it safe, and instructing her to hand it over to an outsider who was not afraid if anything happened to her. Michael took the notebook with shaking hands and opened it. The pages were filled with Eleanor's tiny handwriting, names, dates, and detailed accounts. Stories of people who had been through situations similar to Chloe's. 8 cases, 8 people Thomas had corrected over the years. All silenced. All forgotten. But as Michael flipped to the middle of the notebook, he noticed something was wrong. Pages were missing. They had been torn out carefully, but it was visible where they used to be attached. He asked Susan where the rest of it was. She averted her eyes, shame evident on her face, and admitted it was her voice low. She explained she tore them out because Eleanor had written things about her family, about her brother, who was part of one of Thomas's corrections years ago, and she was scared of what would happen if someone read it. Sarah asked tensely if she still had the pages. Susan nodded slowly, saying she hid them in a place only she knew about. Michael insisted they needed all of them. I know. Susan took a deep breath, but explained she could not go get them because Thomas had people watching her every move since Eleanor vanished, and if she went up there, they would know. Michael told her to tell him where they were, declaring he would go. Susan looked at him as if she were measuring his soul and mentioned a young man named Ethan who worked for Thomas but was not like the others. She had seen him question things, and if anyone could grab the pages without raising suspicion, it was him. Michael felt a pang of mistrust, asking how she knew she could trust him. I do not. Susan closed the notebook. But it is the only chance we have got. It took 2 days to track down Ethan and convince him. The guy was young, no more than 25, with restless eyes and hands that never stopped fidgeting. He was nervous when Michael approached him on a secluded path, far from Thomas's watch. He immediately said he could not do it, fearing what would happen if Thomas found out. Michael interrupted him, taking a shot in the dark, telling Ethan that Thomas already knew he was having doubts, which made the young man go pale, and challenged him if he thought he could hide it. Ethan went quiet. Michael softened his tone, asking for his help, explaining that Eleanor protected the truth. Chloe tried to protect that truth, and now it was his turn to decide whose side he was on. Ethan looked down at his own hands, then nodded. On the 12th day, Michael and Ethan tried to reach the place where Chloe was being held. Susan had provided directions to an alternate route, less guarded, that wound through a narrow, rocky gorge. But the recent rains had turned the terrain into a trap. The ground was slick, loose stones rolled out from under their feet. Michael wiped out twice. On the second fall, he smashed his right shoulder against a jagged rock. The pain was instant and paralyzing. He lost all use of his arm for hours. Ethan carried him part of the way, the young man panting under the weight. They reached the spot by nightfall. It was a simple structure, an old, drafty wooden shed with no heavy deadbolts. Matthew was standing guard outside, but he was distracted, smoking a cigarette. Ethan walked right up with an excuse, saying Thomas had sent him to fetch something, and Matthew did not even bat an eye, as the kid still had the apparent trust of the loyalists. Michael waited, hiding among the boulders, his shoulder screaming in pain, the night chill biting at his skin. Ethan emerged with Chloe. She was pale, thinner, but walking under her own power. Her eyes met Michael's for a split second, and in that second, there was something he could not quite put a name to. It was not gratitude, it was recognition. But Matthew had noticed something. Some little detail. A wrong move. As they were nearing the trail back, Matthew shouted. They ran. Michael with his busted shoulder, Chloe with her legs weak from days of confinement, Ethan leading the charge. They made it back to the property when night had fully set in. Sarah met them at the door, but her face was grim. She said Claire, Ryan's wife, was there and left a message. Michael, out of breath, asked what it was. "Thomas knows," Sarah said, explaining he ordered Luke and 2 other guys to come get Michael at dawn, not Chloe. Michael. Michael felt the floor drop out from under him. Chloe looked at him, and for the first time spoke with something resembling urgency, telling him he needed to leave. No. Michael dropped heavily into a chair, refusing to run away. "Then you are going to die," Chloe stated, devoid of emotion. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, announcing he brought the pages. Everyone stared at him. Ethan pulled a folded, yellowing stack of papers from his inner jacket pocket, the pages torn from Eleanor's notebook. Michael took them, unfolded them, and read them. And he understood why Susan had been so terrified. It was all right there. Every name, every method, every justification Thomas had used over the years to control, punish, and silence. They were not just accounts. They were confessions penned in Eleanor's own handwriting, documenting conversations she had witnessed and decisions she had seen made. "This ruins him," Michael said, his voice shaking. "If someone reads it," Sarah added, "if someone believes it." Michael looked at Chloe, then at Ethan, then at the pages in his hands. For the first time in days, he felt like there might be a way out. A narrow pass, a dangerous one, but a pass. On the 15th day, Rachel arrived in the mountains. She was a volunteer teacher, coming up every year to work with the community's kids for a few weeks, driving an old but reliable pickup truck, loaded down with books, notebooks, and an energy that stood in stark contrast to the weight Michael felt on his shoulders. Sarah intercepted her on the dirt road before she hit the main settlement, with Michael by her side. Sarah told Rachel bluntly she needed to talk to her. Rachel stepped out of her truck, looking confused, asking what was going on and if something happened. Michael showed her Eleanor's notebook, the torn pages, and told her about Chloe, the cage, and Thomas. And when he finished, she crossed her arms, skeptically pointing out that Thomas had been respected around there for years. She knew him. He was no saint, but what they were saying required more than just talk. Michael handed her the notebook and told her to read it. Rachel spent the rest of the day reading, sitting in her truck, then on the porch of Michael's cabin, then in the kitchen. She read every account, every date, every name. The torn pages Ethan had retrieved were the most damning, detailing not only the deeds but the justifications, the manipulations, and the whole system Thomas had built over the years. When she finally finished, it was dark. And as Rachel looked up, Michael saw that something in her eyes had shifted. She said she had contacts, people on the outside, official documentation, and that this needed to get out of there. Sarah cut in, stating that before that, they needed to confront Thomas with witnesses and the community present. Otherwise, he would make it all disappear before anyone from the outside ever set foot up there. Rachel nodded slowly, agreeing that Susan could help organize a gathering on neutral ground away from his territory. And that is exactly what they did. On the 16th day, they arranged an informal meeting on Susan's land. It was not a huge crowd, just a handful of people including Michael, Chloe, Sarah, Ethan, Rachel, Susan, and 3 of the older residents Eleanor had entrusted with her records over the years. But Kyle had tailed Ethan. When Thomas showed up, he was not alone. Matthew and Luke flanked him. And he did not barge in like a trespasser. He strolled in like an invited guest, stepping onto Susan's property with his usual unnerving calm, greeting everyone present and taking a seat among them as if he belonged there. He began with a polite tone, saying he heard there was a misunderstanding and he came to clear the air. Michael's stomach tied in knots as several people in the crowd wavered because Thomas's presence still carried weight and commanded authority. That was when Chloe stood up. She had not said a word since stepping onto Susan's land, sitting in the corner, watching, wrapped in that silence Michael knew so well. But now she was on her feet, her eyes locked on Thomas, and there was something entirely different in her stance. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was resolve. "There is no misunderstanding," Chloe said, her voice low but unyielding. "There is the truth, and you know it." Thomas looked at her with that blank expression, telling her she was being disciplined and that had already been explained. "I was locked inside a metal cage." Chloe cut him off, her voice rising just a notch, surrounded by wasps, with no water and no food for days, asking if he called that discipline. "I call it a necessity," Thomas replied, unbothered, claiming she trespassed without permission. Chloe took a step closer, declaring she came because Eleanor invited her. She sent for her because she knew he was erasing her history, and because he was terrified of the truth. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Thomas's face. A twitch. Barely there. Chloe pressed on, laying out every detail, the buzzing of the wasps, the freezing metal against her skin, the days spent wondering if anyone would come, and the creeping certainty that she would die out there, alone and forgotten. The silence that swept over the group was unlike any that had come before. Michael watched people avert their eyes from Thomas, saw Susan press her lips together tight, and saw one of the old-timers, a man named Arthur, cross his arms and shake his head. Chloe demanded to know where Eleanor was, holding Thomas's gaze, asking where he had put her. Thomas did not answer right away, but something inside him was cracking, his mask of composure beginning to slip, and he finally said she was perfectly safe, but his voice lacked its usual iron grip. "Where?" Rachel stood up now, wielding the authority of someone who documented everything, demanding he show them right then. It was Ethan who delivered the final blow, staring Thomas down and revealing she was at the miller's house. He saw it, explaining they thought they were protecting her because Thomas told them she was confused and needed to rest. Thomas shot up from his chair, and for the first time, Michael watched him totally lose his cool. He started talking fast, almost tripping over his words, insisting everything he did was for the good of the community, to protect it and keep order, asking if they thought it was easy or if anyone ever said thank you. He looked around frantically, desperate for an ally, claiming he healed people, organized things, and kept the whole place running when nobody else wanted to step up. "You hurt people," Arthur barked out, his voice a low rumble, adding that he controlled and silenced them. Thomas looked at him, then at the rest of them, and finally his eyes landed on Chloe, spitting out that she should have kept her mouth shut, with genuine venom in his voice for the first time. "But I did not," Chloe fired back. On the 17th day, they found Eleanor. The Miller family had been keeping her in a remote cabin, genuinely believing they were doing the right thing, and when Rachel pulled up with Michael, Susan, and a couple of the elders, they did not want to unlock the door. But once the pages of the notebook were read aloud, including the accounts Eleanor herself had penned, their resistance crumbled. Eleanor walked out of the house, leaning on Susan, a frail-looking woman with white hair pinned up in a messy bun, but her eyes still held that razor-sharp glare that Thomas had feared all along. She told the Miller family, without malice but with deep exhaustion, that they locked her away like she was something fragile, but she was not, and never had been. When they confronted Thomas again, this time with Eleanor standing right there, with the complete notebooks in hand, and with Rachel writing down every single word, he tried to talk his way out of it and justify it all. But every sentence that left his mouth was a confession. He talked about purpose, necessity, and providing protection that went unappreciated, and the more he talked, the hollower he sounded. Eleanor let him exhaust himself, before telling him in a soft but utterly ruthless tone that he never healed anyone, he just needed control. The rightful leaders of the community, who had backed down out of fear for years, finally found their voices again. Thomas was officially stripped of any scrap of authority. Ryan and Kyle, without Thomas's power structure behind them, had no real muscle of their own, and the entire web he had spun unraveled in a matter of hours. On the 18th day, Chloe, Eleanor, Susan, and Claire decided together what to do with the rocky clearing. They cleared the brush, and Michael hauled the cage away himself, even with his shoulder screaming at him, tossing it down a steep